Hey everybody, welcome back to Brew Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Adsit, and hope everybody had a pretty good weekend this weekend. Hope everybody was able to enjoy some of the nice weather that we had over the weekend. At least in town, we did end up having a little bit of rain on Saturday, but all told, it was a pretty nice weekend weather-wise, especially yesterday. So hope everybody was able to enjoy some of that. So the Brewers lose 2 out of 3 to the Chicago Cubs and are now currently tied for the NL Central Division lead. Not obviously quite what we were hoping to see out of this series, but the way I look at it is you went into Chicago with a 1-game lead. You won 1 game to maintain at least a tie in the division lead through that weekend series. So I think it's still a win here for the Brewers. I think the Cubs are obviously a very good team this year. Starting pitching's very strong. They've got a really good offense. So just looking at the numbers, looking at where our record sits right now, Brewers at 20-13. I really think, even though this weekend they didn't pull out this series, I still think we're playing a lot better form of baseball than we have in the past week or so. I think starting with that Tampa Bay Rays series, which when we were able to gather some wins, I really do think that we're starting to see a better form of Brewers baseball here as of recently, so not too much to complain on that side. Like I said, Brewers would have liked to obviously win this series against the Chicago Cubs and kind of solidify and at least have a 2-game lead of the Cubs and the Central Division. But I don't think not too much of a negative thing here for this week. And like I said, you get the 1 win, you remain at least tied in the NL Central. So I think it's kind of a win in all standpoints from that. So with that, we will kind of talk about what happened in each game. Just give a little bit of breakdown as usual of what went on in these games this series. So on Friday, excellent comeback victory, probably one of the better comeback victories so far for the Brewers this year. They did have that one against the Pirates about a week ago, which was also very exciting. But this one, really good. Brewers win this game 3-1. And it really all started Joe Ross. He had a really nice bounce-back start after struggling in that start against the New York Yankees. He ends up going 6 innings pitched on 4 hits and 1 earned run. And I really think the big thing in this one that stood out to me, and I think what was able to keep Joe Ross successful in this one, was his command was really good, and it showed with no walks being allowed in this game. This has been a big thing for Joe Ross here early in the season through this first month of baseball or so. It seems like he's really struggled with at times, letting the leadoff runner on with a walk or something like that, or just giving out a high amount of walks in general in a game. And I mean, for any pitcher out there, obviously giving up walks is not what you want to do. It's just providing the offense basically free bases, putting those high-stress pitches for those pitchers. And this is something specifically with Joe Ross that we've seen some struggle with. We've seen it with some of the bullpen guys out of the bullpen for the Brewers. But I think he did an excellent job in this one. Like I said, no walks allowed. And I think that was a big thing for him. I think it allowed him to stay true to his stuff. He didn't feel like he was trying to press too much on specific pitches or, be too perfect with his placement. I think he was able to mix his pitches really well, but keeping those guys off base really allowed him to excel in his command in this one. So like I said, he goes 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, no walk. So a really good game and a bounce-back game for him after that struggle against the Yankees. And really not too much offense for the Brewers to speak of heading into through the first 7 innings of the game. But heading into the 8th inning, we have a huge at-bat from Jackson Chourio, which is excellent to see. We've seen him go through a little bit of ups and downs so far this year, obviously. Started the season at a very good clip. And then recently, he's just really been in a funk. And you've kind of got to expect this from a kid that's only 20 years old coming in. He's got to learn to make adjustments, because different than maybe some of the minor league systems, these MLB teams watch for things that hitters struggle with. And specifically, he struggled with the down and away off-speed pitch, kind of laying off that pitch. He's been chasing it a lot. And then also the fastball up has been a big struggle for him. Fastball towards the top of the zone, he's been having having a tough time getting on top of the ball and beating the bat to the ball. So this seems to be kind of a little bit of a struggle for him, but this was an excellent at bat. I think, if I remember correctly, it was an 8-pitch at bat that he had with this one. On a 3-2 count, he was able to shoot one back up the middle for a base hit and kind of got this rally started in the 8th. So that follows with a base steal by Churio, gets him in scoring position. And then, of course, nobody else has been as impactful this season as no other than William Contreras, who hits a game-tying single to left field. And then it just kind of bounced all over the place from here in this inning. We see Willy Adames. He gets the go-ahead RBI single up the middle with 2 outs. Jake Bauers comes through with back-to-back singles and gave the Brewers a 3-run 8th inning to give them a 3-1 lead, which, like I said, ended up being the final tally in this one. But the big thing in this inning, which the Brewers, we've talked about this so often this year, 4 stolen bases in this inning versus the Cubs' Albert Alzolay. And I think, a lot of the dissing that I heard is, well, the Cubs catcher Amaya can't throw out runners, and there is some truth to that. He has struggled on holding runners and getting any caught stealings here as the Cubs catcher so far this year. But really, I think these stolen bases all amount to Albert Alzolay's poor way of being able to hold runners on base. He generally has a pretty slow move to the mound. He takes a little while in his windup to get to home plate, even pitching out of the stretch. But even just the lack of throwing over and holding runners and trying to kind of get them to think in their heads of, maybe he's going to pick off or whatever. I mean, some of the Brewers with Contreras and Bauers and even Adames basically had running starts before his windup even started or his motion even started towards home plate. So just some pretty easy stolen bases, really, for the Brewers offense. And I think, Jason Lane and Pat Murphy, whoever it was that was making the calls, whether it was getting relayed out of the dugout to the third base coach or even to the first base coach, Quentin Berry, whatever it may be, whoever was in charge of calling these stolen bases did a great job of taking the opportunity and making the most out of it, and really was what made this inning what it was. Like I said, 3-run inning, Brewers steal the lead, and then some great innings out of the bullpen. We saw Trevor McGill, he got the save in this one for his second of the year, and so it's good to have him back, and he seems to be doing pretty good and back to where he was pitching at the beginning of the season. So, I mean, really, this was a really exciting game. I was in class most of the day, didn't really get a chance to watch too much of it. Had a couple exams there on Friday, and then as I was coming out of it, it was 1-0 going into the 7th inning, and I'm just like, geez. I mean, we kind of knew that there was going to be some good starting pitching matchups in this one, but I did not think that it was going to be 1-0 going into the 7th and then eventually the 8th inning. 7th is where I was able to begin watching there, but I was very excited to see the Brewers come back. Huge victory at that point, put us up 2 games ahead in the NL Central. And just another one of these topics, just another one of these games for the Brewers, where no matter when we lose, besides a couple games there against the Yankees and I think one against the Twins earlier this season, every game the Brewers have lost, they've been in it. It's been competitive down to, basically the last at bat. They've had their opportunities in the later innings, usually put together some kind of threat or rally in the later innings. And that's exactly what we saw in this one. And they came through. They got the victory. They stole the lead in the 8th and late innings there. So excellent game for them. Big win in Pat Murphy's return. This was still under Ricky Weeks. So he goes 2-0 as the manager for the Milwaukee Brewers. So congrats to him as well. And filling in for Pat Murphy here in these couple games while he served his 2-game suspension. So with that, we'll kind of jump into Saturday's game and kind of follow that, obviously, with Sunday's game. So Saturday, a little bit of a rough start there for Tobias Myers. He ends up giving up 4 runs on 4 walks. And the big thing for him so far early in the season and stayed consistent in this game is the home run ball. He gave up a couple home runs in this one, and he's given up a home run in each of his starts so far this season. So, this is kind of something that we've seen common with some of the Brewers starting pitching in the past. We've seen, Colin Reyes obviously kind of going through a struggle with that currently. We've seen Corbin Burns. He seems seemed to always be pretty susceptible to the home run ball, even as dominant as he was on the mound. So this is definitely something, only his third start in the major leagues. There's definitely stuff to build upon in his starts. The way that he was able to kind of bounce back, still ended up giving up 4 runs, but he was able to escape that first inning with only 2 runs, even though he surrendered 4 walks in that inning. So, he still has the ability to limit the damage, and he did limit it in the 3 innings that he pitched. Like I said, definitely not the start that you were hoping for, especially trying to build upon that win on Friday's game and then just build that lead in the division. But really, I do think that he had a good start. I think, like I said, I think there's still things to build upon. There's things to improve on, and you're going to expect that out of a 25-year-old making his first few starts in the major leagues. There's going to be adjustments. He's going to have some downfalls, but he's definitely got the stuff, I think, and the movement on some of his off-speed pitches. And when his velocity's up there in 94, 95, it definitely plays better off of those off-speed pitches. But I think he's got the movement and the mechanics to be a successful pitcher in this league, and I think he's shown glimpses of that in a couple of the starts against the Pirates and the Yankees. He really had, just the one home run that hurt him, and I think there's definitely some things to build upon for him after this one. So a little bit of a rough outing, but hey, we jump in, still the same thing, same story as Friday's game for the offense here, and then all of a sudden we get to the 7th inning, finally get into the bullpen of the Chicago Cubs after Tyone pitched 6 innings of scoreless baseball, and the Brewers score 4 runs, put up 4 in the 7th inning, all started with an Oliver Dunn RBI triple, scoring Jackson Chourio. Then Blake Perkins came up. He continued to stay hot with a 2-run home run, and Sal Frelick then followed this up with a 2-run, run-scoring double there. And at this point, you've got a runner on second base, nobody out. The Brewers had collected however many hits it was in a row, or had at least gotten as many people on base in a row there to start the inning. And all of a sudden, Wrigley Field got pretty quiet. Brewers were making a huge comeback, and you had William Contreras coming up, Willy Adames, and unfortunately not able to squeak across the tying run in the 7th inning with a man on second and nobody out. But still, you put 4 up on the 7th inning, kind of got to the Cubs bullpen, which has been a big struggle for them so far in this season. So really good things from the offense. Like I said, we keep going back to this narrative that the Brewers always put themselves in a position to come back. In this case, even down 5-0 heading into the later innings, still able to mount a comeback. And then really the big thing in this one that ended up being a huge outcome. So 8th inning, Brian Hudson gives up a leadoff triple, and he's been so dominant this year. So even really surprising to see him even give up a base runner, but obviously throughout the season, hitters are going to make adjustments. And the pitch that he gave up the triple on, really not a bad pitch. It was a sweeper down below the zone, and the Cubs hitter just did a better way of getting to it and sent it down the right field line for a triple. Anyway, so moving on from that, Hudson escapes Dansby Swanson. He gets him to ground out, makes it 1 out. We have Patrick Wisdom coming up, and on a 1-2 pitch, he throws a sweeper right at the bottom of the zone. And actually, according to the square zone, basically most of the ball was inside the strike zone. Granted, the home plate umpire in this one was pretty consistent with the low ball not being called a strike from what I was seeing. And unfortunately didn't get called strike 3, which then allowed Patrick Wisdom to get a base hit on a couple pitches following that pitch. So obviously would have wished to have that pitch call go the other way, and that would have made it 2 outs with a runner on third, and then Brian Hudson did end up recording an out to the next hitter. So it's like, maybe he could have escaped that inning with no runs allowed, and just ended up, being a little bit frustrating considering that it ended up being the difference in this game. Brewers were able to rally one off of Hector Neris in the 9th inning with a Contreras RBI double. And then again, just the offense pretty good in this one with all told, runners in scoring position and stuff, but just not able to get that big hit, tie the game, and at the least send this into the bottom of the 9th and then into extra innings. So, but like I said, I still think this was a very good game. Brewers did end up losing 6-5, but to be down 5-0 heading into the 7th inning and to continue making this game competitive and making it interesting into the later innings, really good credit to the Brewers offense there to stay with it, to still put up some good at-bats in a time where they could have just kind of held their heads. Great job by the bullpen, too, to kind of stop the bleeding there for the most part in those later innings after giving up 4 runs in the first 3. So really good job by the bullpen, like I said, for the most part to hold them down. And still some positives to build up on this one. Brewers, like I said, didn't come up with the victory, but all told, still a fun game to watch, competitive game down to the last pitch, and everything that you can ask for in a division rivalry with the Cubs. So then we head into Sunday's game, rubber match here against the Chicago Cubs. And then this was just kind of a game that it just seemed like all that could go wrong for the Brewers went wrong. We saw Freddie Peralta. He struggled again in this one after a really good start against the Tampa Bay Rays that got cut short with that ejection. But this kind of looked like that start a couple of starts ago for Freddie against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Just kind of losing command, it seemed like. Seemed like the velocity was there. He was hitting 96, 97 on the radar gun pretty consistently, which is pretty good for him. And especially with his off-speed pitches, with his slider, his curveball, and a pretty heavy use of changeup in this one as well. But it just seemed like, he had the stuff to play the fastball off really well with the off-speed stuff. It was just the location was not quite there. Seemed like the slider was giving him all sorts of trouble. And really, he was right there on the outside corner, doing a really nice job of starting it in the strike zone and letting it finish outside of the strike zone. Credit to the Cubs offensive players. They did a really nice job, I thought, laying off some of these off-speed pitches and getting themselves in hitters' counts. And I think once they got themselves into hitters' counts, it just seemed like Freddie didn't want to throw them a competitive pitch or give them anything to hit whatsoever. He ends up giving up 6 walks in this one, records 5 strikeouts, and did only give up 3 earned runs. So even in a day where Freddie's struggling, he still was able to put together a pretty solid start. It was just the 6 walks and the ramp up of the pitch count for him in this one that really kind of hurt him. There were some at-bats with the command that just seemed like they weren't even competitive. Cubs batters didn't even really have to think about swinging at some of the pitches. And this is something we've seen from Freddie in the past. Sometimes the walks have given him some trouble, and he loses command at times. But overall this season, he's been really good. He's been a really solid ace for the Milwaukee Brewers system so far. And I think, there's definitely something to improve on here for his next start. But I do still think there was a lot of positives in this start overall. So hopefully he's able to bounce back here again in his next start. Now, right now we're not exactly sure when that might be. I'm guessing starting today he'll start his suspension after having to wait a few days on that appeal. It didn't sound like he got any sort of a reduction, which wasn't expected, but at least gave him the chance to pitch here against the Chicago Cubs, and we would have liked to see him collect a victory, but ends up getting his first loss of the year. And really, this is the first game out of all of Freddie Peralta's starts so far that we've seen a loss result from it. He's 6-1 following this one so far in games started, and like I said, he'll likely serve that suspension here starting today, and probably will miss one start, or not even so much miss a start, but we'll just get pushed back an extra day before we'll see him likely again sometime during this next homestand for the Brewers. So that kind of covers all of the in-game analysis. I wanted to try and kind of keep it a little bit shorter as there was a couple other things that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, definitely some offense that we would have wished we would have been able to get to the starting pitching. Cubs starting pitching, hats off to them. They pitch 18 innings of scoreless baseball between Tyone, Assad, and I'm kind of blanking right now on who started in Friday's game. But like I said, just a really good credit to them. They have a really strong starting pitching. I think the main question for them is how they're going to progress with the struggle in bullpen that they've had so far. Pretty good innings yesterday from Almonte and some of the other guys out of the Cubs bullpen, but overall they're starting pitching strong, but the bullpen is one of the worst right now ERA-wise in the MLB. So definitely something if they want to stay competitive, something that they're going to have to clean up. Maybe as we move into the trade deadline, there will be a couple moves made or a couple pickups. I think out of anywhere in their roster that I can see as an outsider, I think probably bullpen is probably their biggest need right now, because and this was a series there they didn't have Bellinger, they didn't have Seiya Suzuki on the offense, so they're still even missing a couple of these key offensive pieces and still putting together some really strong numbers. Christopher Morel's staying hot. He didn't have a home run yesterday, but he got on base every at-bat in yesterday's game with 3 walks. He hit a home run in the first 2 games of the series as well. So they've definitely got some really strong offensive ways. I think the bullpen's probably going to be the thing that they need to search for and seek for most as the season progresses. So, and then I just wanted to break down. So really some unfamiliar territory for the Brewers. We talked about this earlier in the season with their offensive numbers. And there's definitely been a little bit of a downfall from the hot start that they had with some of the output runs on the board that they were putting off early in the season. Not, seeing quite such high tallies, but overall, offense right now for the Milwaukee Brewers still one of the best in baseball. And this, like I said, very uncharted territory for the Milwaukee Brewers offense in the past. Usually they're sitting down, towards the bottom 5 teams in most of the big offensive categories. But how about this year so far? Right now, they're third in the MLB in stolen bases. We've definitely, spent a lot of time talking about that, put a lot of emphasis on that in helping the Brewers' ability to score runs, to produce runs, put, stress on the pitchers, causing them to maybe lay some pitches over the middle, which give batters, better pitches to hit. And it just really, the ability to create stolen bases, put guys with put them in scoring position, and get extra at-bats with runners in scoring position, obviously you're going to end up having a higher run outcome. And just some really strong things that we've seen. That's one of the strong things we've seen from this offense that they've continued to put a big emphasis on with Pat Murphy at the helm of the Brewers coaching staff. So I think that's been a big difference in him and his philosophy. The Chicago Cubs right now actually sit towards the bottom in stolen bases, which I do personally think has a lot to do with Craig Counsell. I think Craig Counsell never really had the belief in running. We never really saw him call too many bunts either, but we've seen a complete change in coaching habits from Pat Murphy, where we've seen a lot of bunts this year. We've seen a lot of aggressiveness on the base paths and stolen bases, and it's paid off, I think. It's really put dividends on helping our offense and helping our impact, even in our pitching, getting some insurance runs late in games, and getting some runs on early that kind of allows the pitcher to be more comfortable, and I think that's a big reason why we're winning a lot of these games. But some of the other categories, second in on-base percentage right now, 6th in batting average in the MLB, 3rd in OPS, and 4th in slugging. So right now, and they sit currently, I believe, 7th in home runs by a team in the MLB. So, like I said, a lot of these big offensive categories right now, the Brewers are right up in the conversation of some of the best in the league. And I think especially with some of the guys and a lot of the young talent we have on our team, this is a great improvement from years past, and just a great improvement and an impact that these young guys are making, like Oliver Dunn, Jackson Chourio, Bryce Terang, and Blake Perkins. How about the way that they've turned, their typical offensive outputs around? They've become one of our better, on-base percentage guys through the lineup here so far this season. So just a really good thing from that standpoint. Really good job by those guys, and just like I said, overall uncharted territory for this Milwaukee Brewers staff, and specifically the offense. So, okay, so one other thing I wanted to touch on here a little bit before we get into some of the matchups and where the current NL Central stands at right now. Sounds like Yelich might be making his return here in this series. He's been taking some swings, taking some batting practice, and actually had one of his best batting practices so far there on May 3rd during the Cubs series. So obviously didn't see him in the Cubs series. Would have liked to see his name scribbled in there at some point there in the lineup, and would have been nice to get him back. But it seems like his goal, he said he has returned his plan is to return before the end of this road trip. So we've only got 3 games here coming up against the Royals. So hopefully we're able to see him return. Definitely going to be another big bat to get back in the Brewers lineup. I think there's definitely been games where we're hurting without him, and just his ability to draw walks, get on base. He's just another one of those guys and a superstar on this offense that can carry the offense and maybe take some of the pressure off of Contreras, and potentially the reason Willy Adames is kind of pressing right now is maybe he feels in the cleanup role that there's a lot of pressure on him, whatever it may be. So getting Yelich back in that 3 hole likely will be really good for the offense and for all the guys around him as well. And then on the pitching side, sounds like DL Hall, he's been progressing pretty steadily after that left knee sprain. So hopefully we're able to see him back here within the next couple weeks, maybe, as he might make probably a rehab assignment there in AAA or wherever it may be. So it'll be good to see him back, get some of our starting pitching guys back. I'm assuming, sounds like Jacob Junis is slowly making his way back. Looks like a timeline on him might be within the month here, depending on, he started to throw the ball a little bit, so hopefully we're able to see him return here at some point. But just wanted to kind of touch on some of the injured list guys that we're hoping to see back and make an impact here as well on this team, as that's another thing. I think the Brewers have played so well with a thin roster for the most part. So many guys on the injured list still missing, Devin Williams, Garrett Mitchell, and some of the other guys. And it just proves our depth and our farm system, really, being able to call up these guys, only have them play a couple of games and make an impact. It's really good to see these guys be able to do that and still win a lot of games pretty consistently. So it's very exciting as a fan. You just think as these guys come back, it can only get better from there. So definitely a lot of excitement and positive things to come, I think, in the future as we get some of these guys off of the injured list. So with that, we're moving in. We'll talk about some of the pitching matchups here coming up to start this week. So Brewers will be facing the Kansas City Royals, who started off the season really hot. They've been off to a little bit of a struggle recently. Both the Brewers and Royals are currently 5-5 in their last 10 games. So pretty even baseball between the two teams being played here in the recent times. But tonight we'll have Bryce Wilson facing left-handed pitcher Cole Ragans for the Kansas City Royals. And this is going to bring up that topic. It'll be interesting to see, are the Brewers able to have any success against a left-handed starter? Typically, this has been a big point of struggle for them. We saw them struggle against Carlos Rodon against the Yankees, and we've seen them struggle against some of the other left-handed pitchers earlier this season. So it'll be interesting to see if the Brewers are able to change this narrative of struggling against left-handed starters here in this one. So going to be important, I think, for the Brewers to hopefully bounce back in this one. Like I talked about in the last episode, it seems like they're on a streak right now where they win 3, lose 3, kind of go back and forth. So it would be nice to see them be able to win this one, kind of bounce back with a win in this series, and get back to our winning ways. And then Tuesday, we'll see Colin Rea facing up against Seth Lugo, who's off to an incredible start for the Kansas City Royals. 5-1 to start the year with a 1.60 ERA. So I think even more important for the Brewers to get the victory tonight, because I do think getting the victory Tuesday could be very difficult. And just another one of these really good starters that the Brewers offense will be facing here so far this year. Seems like there's been a lot of them so far this year. A lot of solid pitching, it seems like, across the MLB in the starting rotations. So going to be interesting to see if the Brewers are able to get off any runs against him. Started the season off really well, being able to put up runs against starting pitching, but in the recent times, it seems like we actually have more luck getting runs off of the bullpen and in the later innings. So we'll see how Tuesday's game goes up with those pitchers. And then Wednesday, series finale, another good starter in Brady Singer, basically the ace to begin the year for them, and he's been really solid this year, and that will be facing the Brewers' Joe Ross to see if he can have a second consecutive positive start and see if he can collect a victory here in this one. So yeah, that looks like what we'll see here in the next few games here for the Brewers coming up. Following this, Brewers will host a 7-game homestand against the Cardinals and Pirates. We'll be playing 4 against the Cardinals Thursday through Sunday, and then Monday through Wednesday we'll be facing the Pittsburgh Pirates before an off day Thursday. And then we'll continue another road trip against the struggling Astros so far this season and the Miami Marlins, who have also had a little bit of a rough start to the year. So I feel like from what I've talked about in the past, I think this series against the Royals is kind of this ending of the really tough beginning stretch for the Brewers so far this season. Not to say the Cardinals and the Pirates playing division rivals is going to be any easier, but record-wise and team-wise, we've had a little bit of success already against these teams. So I think there's going to be some more wins after this Royals series, as long as the Brewers can survive, hopefully pull out a series victory in this one. I think the schedule for the next couple weeks is going to end up getting a little bit easier, and maybe we'll see a couple more wins and potential to pull ahead a little bit farther in the NL Central. So just looking ahead, looks like the schedule will get a little bit easier. Going to be very important for the Brewers to win against the teams that they're supposed to, as it seems like in the past year or so that's been a little bit of a struggle too. It seems like we almost play better against the good teams, so going to be interesting to see. Feel like we haven't really had any games against some rough teams and rough record teams here in the season. Even Tampa Bay was hovering around 500 still. Pirates and Cardinals are still hovering around 500, so still going to be some good games in competitive baseball, but we'll see what comes of that. So, yeah, just to give a little breakdown here before we wrap up of what the NL Central looks like. Haven't talked about it in a couple of episodes now. So Brewers, Cubs, like I said, tied for first in the NL Central. Cubs will go on to play 3 at home against the San Diego Padres starting later tonight. The Reds right now were swept in a 3-game series at home versus the Baltimore Orioles. They're currently sitting below 500. They will play at the next 3 at home against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Pirates Cardinals right now also both sitting below 500. Pirates ended up winning 2 out of 3 against the Colorado Rockies, and they will play the next 3 at home against the Los Angeles Angels. And the Cardinals, they lose 2 of 3 at home against the White Sox. So definitely a little frustration probably for them, wishing that they would have been able to collect a series victory against the White Sox. Their kind of offensive struggles so far this season seem to be the downside for their team. That kind of continues here in this series. But they'll move on and play 3 at home against the Mets starting this week as well. So, yeah, so kind of just going over NL Central, definitely not quite as strong as it was to begin the year. 3 teams right now sitting below 500. But I still think this is one of the better divisions in baseball. I think some of these teams are still trying to kind of find consistency, battling through some injuries and some big key players right now. So as we kind of see that, I think, the Reds for sure, I'm guessing are going to pull back above 500. They've been playing some pretty solid baseball, just struggling a little bit, playing some good teams right now in a stretch. So I think they'll bounce back, probably pull back above 500, and I think it's going to be, a battle to the very end like we've seen in years past for the NL Central. I don't expect anything less based on the competitiveness and just what we've seen there in the past. So, yeah, with that, Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast is always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other mainstream podcast sites. So feel free to listen to this podcast from wherever it is you may like in the future. I can always be reached on social media using @brew_pod on Twitter or by searching Brew Pod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. Hope you guys are able to enjoy some of the games this week. Hopefully we're able to see the Brewers bounce back with a couple wins and maybe hopefully win a couple series back-to-back here coming up with the homestand following this series against the Royals. So yeah, with that, we'll talk to you soon. See you next time. And of course, go Brewers!